All right, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you all. Okay, can you all hear me loud and clear?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and can you also see my screen? Just wanted to make
Yes,
sure.
ma'am.
Good, good. All right. So this is the first model that we will discuss today. It's known as Dance helical model. Again, like other models, this model is also named after the person who proposed it. So this is why it's called Dance model. I have forgotten the full name of that person. However, I can check it and I can let you know maybe in next class. So this model, although it is named after the person who proposed it, but along with that, it is also a helical model. We'll talk about that. Why is it called a helical model in a minute? We'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So yeah, here's the full name. Then the model was proposed by a scholar whose name was Frank Dance, and the model was proposed in 1967. Now this model is kind of unique because instead of presenting information in a linear form or in a circular form, we saw that Laswell's model, Shannon and Weaver's model, they talked about communication as a linear process. Similarly, Osgood and Schramm's model talked about communication as a circular process. However, this model is different from the model that we discussed earlier in the sense that it talks about the process of communication in a helical way. That is why, and I'll talk about this, that what is the meaning of helical in a minute. But it says that information is a process that happens in a helical way. That is why it is known as Dance helical model. Like I said, this was my previous screen. Dance, because the model was proposed by a scholar whose name was Frank Dance. And why it's called helical? Because it says that the information is transmitted in the form of a helix. Now, can anyone here tell me what is a helix or helical structure? Anything comes in your mind? Okay, forget about helix or helical. Let me ask you another question. Nimra,
Ma'am, that looks like a DNA, I guess. I'm not sure.
yeah, good job. You are very close. Hubab, were you speaking?
Fatma.
It's a spring
Fatma.
like.
Go ahead, please say it one more time.
It's a spiral
Yes,
model.
yes, spiral. Very good. What is spiral?
Ma'am, it's a spring like structure.
Yes, yes.
Spring like.
Very good. I was going to say that, have you ever seen a spring? Now let's see that this is a sort of cylindrical structure. Imagine that this is a round structure. I'm holding a pencil in my hand right now. So if I take a wire and I wind it around my pencil, imagine that I wind the wire around my pencil and then I take it out. It would be like a helix, something that goes like this. Okay, that is helical. Something, it looks pretty much like a spring or a spiral structure. Fatma was right that you may have observed this while you were studying DNA structure and all that. So a helical is something that, again, to repeat, if you hold a cylinder sort of structure in your hand, or let's imagine a pencil, and you take a wire and you wind it around the pencil, and when, so the structure that it shapes, like the something that goes like this, the structure that it takes is known as helical structure. It looks like a spring, by the way. Is this clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am.
All right, let's see now. Like I said, that helix means a kind of spiral sort of structure, something that goes in a winding shape. Like it's imagine that there is a structure, a cylinder, a rod maybe. I was showing you my pencil. My pencil looks like a rod, and something which is wound around this pencil would be helical. So this is how helical's model look like, Dan's model look like. And why is it's called a helical model? The picture tells you very clearly that why is it called a helical model. You can see the shape of helix here. So Dan's helical model showing the dynamic nature of the communication process. Let me tell you very briefly what it is and what this model describes just by looking at this picture. Wait a minute. So what Frank Dance proposed in this model was, he said that communication is a process that has a dynamic nature, and that is why it looks like a helical process. Now with this, I would like to ask you this question, that what is the meaning of dynamic? What is the meaning of the word dynamic? Anyone? Hubab, Nimra, Amina?
Something that keeps moving.
I'm sorry?
Something that keeps moving.
Shabash,
Something
Ahmed.
that keeps moving.
Yes, Ahmed, Shabash. Please, everyone, turn on your cameras. I am giving you 5 minutes. Turn on your cameras. Ahmed is absolutely right. So dynamic means something that keeps changing.
Ma'am, does dynamic actually also mean continuous?
Continuous, yes, very good, very good. There is this element of continuity in it, like it's changing. Okay, now what does the word dynamic mean here in this helical model? Let me explain. So Frank Dance was of the view, and he argued that communication, especially mass communication, is a dynamic field. It is a process that keeps changing. And that is why we can describe, in order to describe this process, I think a helical structure describes the development of field of mass communication really, really well. He said that in order to study the progress in the field of mass communication, we can study it best in the form we can study it best in the when we consider it in the form of a helix. So now let me translate this model with the help of an example. Imagine the history of human communication, or just let's imagine the history of mass communication, not human, forget about human communication for now. Now pay attention to what I'm saying, and also to this structure in the context of what I'm saying. So I am saying that imagine the example of mass communication, the evolution of mass communication. How did the field of mass communication evolve? It all began at this point, with the invention of printing. Okay? In 1400 something, Gutenberg press was invented. First time printing press came, and that was the time that revolutionized the process of communication. Okay? Now, with the help of printing press, of course, they were able to publish and produce newspapers. So it began, mass communication actually began from printing press, from newspapers, and then radio came. See here, radio. From radio we moved to telephone, and then to TV, film studies. See, the spiral is also getting bigger. It all began from a printing press, then newspapers, then radio, telephone, then film, then television expanded the field of communication, and then comes internet that further expanded the field. And now in the field, and then social media. Now social media is something that is connecting people really, really fast. See how the process of evolution has happened in the course of human history. Something that started from the invention of printing press, then expanded to the field of newspapers, and then further expanded to electronic media, radio, telephone, then film, and then television, and then internet, and then social media. It keeps changing. So see, it starts from a small point, it keeps getting bigger. And here, if we study the process of evolution of mass communication, I think this helical spring describes the process really, really well. When I asked you the meaning of dynamic, Fatima said that something that looks like a spiral. Sorry, not about spiral. Fatima said that the meaning of dynamic is something continuous. There was some other person who said the meaning of dynamic is something that keeps changing. See, the field of mass communication, if we study the history of evolution of mass communication, the spring tells us it keeps changing and it keeps getting bigger. Okay? Now, any question, or I can explain it then with another example. Any questions so far? Does this all make sense? Does this all make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Let's translate the same model in the history of human communication.
Yes.
Earlier, I gave you the example of evolution of mass communication. Let's discuss the same model in the history of human communication. So, for example, after a child is born, soon after that, he starts learning language. And after he learns the language, okay, soon after, first he begins from listening, of course. After listening, he learns the language and then he starts speaking. So here he was listening and then he starts speaking, then he goes towards education. And at this stage, you see, he is expanding his communication because now he's learning maybe writing as well. So it began from a child. We are translating this model. Wait a minute, please. All right, students, my power just went out. I hope that the power will be back again soon, but if my call drops, please do not worry. I'll reconnect shortly. Okay? I'll reconnect. But yeah, all right. So let's talk
Yes,
about,
ma'am.
I already gave you the example of mass communication. I would like to give you another example of human communication. So I was saying that soon after a child is born, he starts learning language. So then he begins from listening process, and then he learns language, he starts communication. It's oral communication that he's doing at this stage. Then he goes to school and learns to write the language. Now he's doing writing communication. And then he goes towards learning complex processes that are related, like let's say he goes for higher education or something. And then after he's educated, now he goes to his profession, office work, and he becomes a productive person where he communicates and everything. So this spiral, again, we have seen that presents a very good example of the evolution in the process of human communication as well. That is why Frank Dance proposed that communication has a dynamic nature, and in order to explain evolution in the process of communication, a helical spring can do uh, can help us understand it better. With that, I have finished the explanation of this model. If you have any question, you can ask now. Otherwise, I'll move to the explanation of my next model. Any question?
No, ma'am.
One thing you may have noticed that this model is different, completely different. In terms of explanation, this model is completely different from Shannon and Weaver's model. It's also different from Laswell's model. So those models were talking about the process of communication. This model specifically deals with the process of progress, development, evolution in a field of mass communication. This model does not have components like feedback, sender, receiver, and all that. This model is kind of different from the models that we have discussed earlier. Okay? Any question about this model? Can I stop sharing my screen and can I begin my next model now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good. So let's, wait a minute. I'll stop recording for a minute so that I can open up my next PowerPoint slide. All right. You can see my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
All right, good. So the next model is known as Gerbner's model. And like all other models, this model again is named after the person who proposed the model. His name was George Gerbner. I'll write his name in the chat box. George Gerbner. That's why it's known as Gerbner's model of communication. Now, let's talk very briefly about what Gerbner's model was. The model was presented by American mass media researcher. He was actually, George Gerbner was a very, very famous communication expert. He served as the dean of Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. Annenberg School for Communication is one of the very well-respected schools of communication in the world. And George Gerbner was dean of this school. So the model was presented in 1956. All right, what is the model now? Well, I'll talk about the features of the model, I think, later. Let me talk about model itself. Now, what I'm going to tell you, it is important for you to listen to this carefully because this is very, very important. Gerbner's model has two versions. When I say versions, what does this mean? Versions, V-E-R, I'll write the word in the chat box. Versions. What is the meaning of the word versions that I just wrote in the chat box?
Verbal means
Yes.
something related to
Additions.
speaking.
Nahi bache, version. I wrote the word in the chat box, not verbal. Ahmed,
So,
Ma'am,
It
types,
means
Other type
variety.
of
Yasser,
it means
you go
additions.
ahead. Yeah, very good. Yasser, what were you saying?
ma'am, other type of the same thing.
Yes, shabash,
Ma'am,
shabash.
variety, kind.
Variety, very good. Now, when I say, very good, when I say Gerbner's model has two versions, it means that Gerbner model comes in two forms. One is this formula form, ठीक है, verbal form, and the other one is graphical form, ठीक है. Like you were saying that the word version means variety or different sorts of forms. I will repeat. Gerbner's model, George Gerbner's model comes in two forms. Wait a minute. George Gerbner's model comes in two forms. Verbal form, which you see here on the screen, and graphical form. Let me show you the graphical form. Really, this is graphical form of Gerbner's model. ठीक है? I'll repeat this information. Gerbner's model comes in two forms. There is graphical form, and then did somebody raise hand? There is verbal form, and then there is graphical form. Let's talk about verbal form. So in verbal form, you can see the model has 10 components. Okay? Let me tell you in the beginning, Gerbner's model has this beauty that it works like building blocks, which means you can take out parts that are relevant to your research. You can take out those parts and you can apply whatever components you want to take out of the model. So you do not have to use all 10 components. So for example, I am a communication scholar and I am doing my research, and I am studying, in my research, I am studying that how do journalists select news stories related to road accidents. Okay? This is what I am studying, that what is the criteria of journalists to select news stories related to road accidents. Now, the model gives me 10 components. The verbal version of model gives me 10 components, it's up to me whatever component I want to use. I can take out maybe only number 4, number 7, number 8, and that's it. And I can omit the rest of the components given here. Now, what does this say? Let's understand this. These 10 components, they say someone, which is a communicator, perceives an event, which is of course the event that is happening. This model is specifically related to the process of mass communication, news especially, okay? And reacts in a situation through some means to make available materials in some form and context, conveying content with some consequence. Okay, I don't think if I can explain it better until and unless I take you to the graphical part of the model, the graphical version of the model. Let's talk about the graphical version of the model, and then I'll come back to this one to ask you if you have any question, okay? But what is important for you to understand at this stage is that Gubner's model has two versions, verbal version and graphical version. All right. So about verbal model, the verbal formula that we just studied, there is a caveat. Caveat ka matlab hota hai caution, a warning that not all elements and stages appear in the graphical model. Also, the graphical model starts with an act of perception. Well, okay. Now, this is the same thing that I just told you, that a researcher can take out any parts out of the model that are related to his or her research study. The researcher does not have to use all 10 components that are given in verbal in verbal model. Okay? All right. Now, just remember these. This is the key to understand the graphical model that I'm going to show you next. When I show you the model, remember the letter E represents an event, any event that needs to be reported. Let's say the event of Prime Minister's speech, or the fire incident. There was a fire incident a few months ago at Hafiz Center. Does anyone remember? The whole building of Hafiz Center, it was burned down.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So E denotes an event that needs to be reported. Letter M denotes perceiver. Like, for example, imagine there is this fire incident happening in front of me, and I am a reporter who is associated with a newspaper organization. I go there and I see the event happening. In that way, I am perceiver. However, if I use my camera, because I am a journalist, I am associated with a newspaper organization, and I use my camera to take the pictures, in this example, the perceiver is my camera, because my camera is taking pictures. So perceiver can be either be a person or it can be a machine as well. And E1 is the perception of the event by the perceiver, M. Now, how is E1 different from E, from event? E is the actual event which is happening. E1 is the perception of the event. How am I going to perceive the event? That is how E1 is different from E. Now I'm going to ask Tabriz to explain this to us, that how E1 is different from E. Go ahead, Tabriz. He's not here. Let's then ask Salman Habib. Salman, can you please turn on your camera? And can you please repeat the same information that I just said, that how is E different from E1? Salman, are you listening to me? Salman Habib. Hamza, are you listening to me, Hamza?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. What did I just say about E, the difference of E and E1? All right. Let's
सर मैं चैट बॉक्स में बता देता हूँ.
huh? I'm sorry. Okay, let's ask Amna. Amna, bete, can you explain how is E different from E1?
Ma'am, E is basically the event which is going on, and E1 is basically the
Shabash.
perception. One person is
Shabash.
one
Shabash.
person is perception about the event.
Perception क्या होती है?
Ma'am,
Understanding. Understanding.
understanding.
Understanding. ठीक है.
कि
चलें.
उस
Let's.
event को देखकर वो क्या experience कर
Of
रहा है.
course. How is he perceiving the event to be? ठीक है, Ahmed.
Yes,
Ahmed
ma'am.
Zia, does this all make sense?
Yes, miss, it makes sense.
ठीक है. Okay, now let's see.
We can also say that perception is an opinion.
Yes.
A certain person's opinion on something.
शाबाश. अच्छा, अब imagine करें that I am standing in front of a building and the building is on fire. And this is my camera. Although these are sticky notes, just assume that I am a journalist holding this camera. Now, with my camera, I am taking the pictures of the building which is on fire. So you see, now this is E1. My pictures are E1, which are different from E, actual event of fire which is happening. How are they different? My camera is only taking the pictures of the front of the building. Okay? So my viewers, when they see the pictures, they cannot see what is happening on the sides of the building. The sides are also burning. Okay? That is how E is different from E1. Does this make sense? ठीक है, Nimra?
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है, समझ आई?
Yes.
That this is very important for you to understand that E is different from E1. So E is the actual event of fire incident which is happening, and I am standing in front of building taking pictures with my camera. ठीक है? My camera is only capturing the front image of the building which is on fire, not the sides and not what is happening inside the building. That is how E1, the pictures that my camera is producing is E1, and that is how E1 is different from E. Let's now see how we can translate all of this in this model. अब ये देखें, ये model है. E is simply event which is happening. I already explained it to you earlier. ठीक है? E is the event which is happening. Now, M is the person who is perceiving the event. If I take you back to my previous slide, मैंने यही कहा था ना, M is the perceiver. It can be a person who sees the event happening and develops a perception. M can be machine as well. I gave you the example of camera. E is the event which is happening. M is the person who is seeing the event happening. And then E1 is the perception of the person or perception of camera, how camera perceives the event. M can be a person or it can be a machine as well. Okay? So this is E, event happening. M is the person or the machine that sees the event happening. M is perceiver. And then E1 is the perception of the event. यहाँ तक समझ आ गई है सबको?
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है. Now please bear with me and please pay attention here because this is really, really important for you to understand this model, and this will be part of your exam as well. ठीक है. चलें, अब let's proceed. Now let's say that M is the perceiver. M is a reporter as well, who is supposed to reproduce the event. What is the meaning of reproduce the event? He is supposed to report the event. So, and then M is a person who sees the event happening, who takes the picture, and he is supposed to report the event to the newspaper. So he uses a media, a channel, of course, media control to transmit the message. He is using camera. He is writing a report. For example, if I am a journalist who sees the event happening, I use my camera to take pictures and I write a report as well. And I use channels, media and all that to to report that event to my newspaper organization, and my newspaper will print that information for audience. Now, what is SE? SE is statement about event. What I am producing right now is statement about event. S can come in any shape form. So it can come in the form of it. Shape form का क्या मतलब है? Pay attention. Shape form means that my information can come in the form of newspaper story, printed form. My shape form can come in the form of a social media story. Okay? It can also come in the form of a broadcast story. So it can take any form. And e-content is like the same, that now here I am generating another event, so which is going to be different from the actual event, because I am reporting that event according to my perception. So you see, what is this model all about? It's about production of message and then perception of message. So now, according to my report, of course, people will develop their own perception. So don't you think that this process tells us that the news that we receive in media is going to be little bit different from the actual event, because the event is getting to us, the information about the event is getting to us by the perceiver. So when we see the information in news, we were not there, we didn't see the actual event happening. The news got to us by this M. So by camera, that maybe only took the pictures of the front side of the story, that didn't cover some other angles. Or similarly, a person who was there at that time, he only covered the information that he could cover. Maybe he was there for only 4 or 3 hours, but the event continued for 8 hours. Okay? See, that is how. So this model actually tells us that mass communication, especially news production, is a process which is a continuation of production, perception, production, perception, production, perception. Okay? Now, questions, please. Questions. Have you all understood what I just explained?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Now, let me tell you that there is continuation, little bit continuation of this model as well. However, okay, let me explain it to you. यहाँ तक समझ आ गया? You all are saying that you have understood it well. ठीक है? Now,
Yes, ma'am.
ठीक है. Now, consider an event related to the condensation of moisture in the air. Condensation क्या होती है? You must have read it in science in high school. ये छोटी क्लासों में भी पढ़ा होगा. Okay, without wasting any time, if I fill up my glass, अगर glass हो, शीशे का glass, if I fill up my glass with cold water, after some time you will see tiny drops at the surface of my glass. That is the process of condensation, which means when hot air meets cold air, it kind of produces water vapors. Okay? Condensation. So, okay, and condensation of moisture in the air. Let's consider an event. We are imagining a situation. Consider an event related to the condensation of moisture in the air. Now, this is the event, condensation of moisture in the air, and E1, it is perceived by a person. And let's see, the person actually perceives the event to be rain, although it was condensation of moisture. I mean, there is moisture in air, and because of that, it's sort of giving wet feelings and condensation. And however, M perceives this to be event. You see, now this perception here, right here is actually different from the actual event. So, okay, now he wants to report this event, and he reports that this event in S, statement about event. He can choose any language, any medium, means. You see, statement SE is statement about event, the same thing. So he says that it's raining. So this is E1, this is misprinted, sorry. Yeah. So S, say this is his perception. Now the same event wants to be reported by someone else. That's what media persons do when they get information from news agencies. So there was an event was covered by a news agency, and news agency prepared a report. Now that report is taken up by a media channel, M2, another perceiver. M was the first perceiver, reporter from a news agency. M2 is the second perceiver of news organization. So he creates his own perception, SE1, and he says it's raining. See, that is how the information, what is the purpose to explain here is that the information that gets to audience, it passes through various channels of perception and production. Actually, Gerbner's model tells us the link of perception, production, perception, production, perception, production. So this is how he says that the information that gets to us sometimes is different from actual event. And this is just some additional information. You can go over it, and if you have any question, you can ask me. Okay, any questions so far? Now, if you read this verbal model, it will make more sense for you. Someone perceives an event and then reacts in a situation through some means. To make available materials mean, he uses any medium, any channel and context, and then conveys content with some consequences. Questions? Okay, time has run out. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. If you ask any question and the call drops, please do not hesitate to write an email to me.